Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the Foley Family Office 10-minute interview series. Today is a very special interview and a very special topic, very timely. That is, we're going to talk with my colleague, John Strom, who is a lobbyist, about whether the biggest question we all have in family office land, which is whether the TCJA will be extended or what will happen with tax reform or tax policy in this upcoming in this administration. My name is Jason Kohout. I'm a partner in the estate and trust practice in our Milwaukee office. I'm also the head of the family office group here at Foley and Lardner. And John, I'll allow you to please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, for having me on. John Strom, I'm a special counsel in Foley's DC office. I'm in the Government Solutions practice group. Prior to joining Foley, I served as a senior attorney on a number of congressional committees on both the House and Senate side, as well as a political appointee in the first Trump administration. So thanks for having me on. Looking forward to discussing the reauthorization of the TCJA.
John, we should note that we are recording this at 3:40 Eastern time on March 6th, 2025. So when you're watching this, it's already out of date. But you're probably so busy with what's going on with the tariffs and 100 other different policy changes with this administration that we've all been hearing about. So we really appreciate you joining. And I'll get right to it. In tax planning and estate planning and that sort of thing, the biggest question our clients have is what will happen to this TCJA? And specifically, we've got a few different specific provisions, but certainly whether the estate tax exemption larger amounts would be are going to be extended.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's certainly we have been casually referring to the debates around the TCJA reauthorization as the tax Super Bowl. Certainly during the campaign, both President Trump and then Vice President Harris made a number of promises regarding specific kinds of income that they were going to exempt from taxes. And now it's time to actually hash out between Congress, the Senate, and the President what the reauthorization is going to look like. So, I'm sure as everyone knows, the estate tax exemption was doubled under the original TCJA. And unless Congress acts, that higher exemption will expire at the end of 2025, lowering the level to about 6 to 7 million per person. So the future of all these major provisions are still up in the air. I think you have to balance a number of competing considerations. There is interest in making sort of, I would say, the bulk of the TCJA permanent so that we don't have to come back here in 5 or 7 or 10 years and reauthorize it. Trump is obviously interested in foregoing taxes on tips, on Social Security, on loans for domestic automobiles is sort of the latest one. But he's also been a consistent opponent of the estate tax, which he's referred to as the death tax. And so I think, reading the tea leaves a little bit, as part of the push to make the sort of the core of the TCJA permanent, I think part of that will be making the higher exemption permanent. I don't believe in this, very narrow House Republican majority that full repeal of the estate tax is possible. But I do think part of the package of sort of key tax provisions that will likely be passed in any final legislation is going to include that higher exemption from the original TCJA. I don't think it's likely to expand, candidly, but I think you're likely to see it put in place on a permanent basis.
So you think, John, that's a big change. I think many of us were taking the approach that there would be a reauthorization, but there'd be some sunsetting to it. The good old, you'll get your extension, but you might as well move because it will go away at some point. Another 10 years. But you're thinking that could be a permanent a permanent fixture that we could be seeing that going forward. Period. We wouldn't necessarily see a
I
loss of it.
think a longer, because the House Republicans, this is getting down in the weeds just a little bit, because the House Republicans were able to pass a budget resolution this past week. I think the chances of a more unified Republican Party pushing permanent reauthorization of the TCJA through has increased. Whether ultimately the deal comes apart because of several members want to include immediate deductions of R&D expenses. Some members want to expand the child tax credit. A lot of blue state Republicans, California, New York, delegations that are essential to the party's majority, also want to increase the SALT deduction. And so all of those increase, and trying to add anything new to the TCJA package is obviously going to increase the deficit. And so whether that necessarily means that we're going for a shorter, you include some of those provisions and you get a shorter reauthorization, that's certainly a possibility. But right now it seems like there's at least, more momentum than the first time we talked for trying to make them permanent.
We should remind everybody we're talking at March 6th at 3:40. It could change.
I make no warranties beyond about 3:50 p.m. when we finish recording.
That's right. John, a key question for an estate planner is whether they would get that done before December 31st, 2025. So if you need to make your gift, you need to make it that day or before that day or before that date, before January 1. Otherwise, you may lose your exemption. And if they get around to changing it in March of next year, it could be it likely would be retroactive. It strikes me, but you wouldn't know that on December 31st. You may be in a position in which you are relying on the Congress to get something done. What's your view on that? Do you think this is a, get it done in October and head home, or is this a more of a drawn out process that bleeds into next year?
I think it probably gets done this year. I know House leadership, so Chairman Jason Smith at Ways and Means are looking to have the sort of the major components of the package put together and announced by Memorial Day. So that's looking at May. And then I think, honestly, it probably doesn't get done on this side of the August recess, although, never say never. But so I think on the early side, you would say May to July 4th, thereabouts, but more likely probably September, October, as the clock starts to tick out. That helps sharpen minds and sharpen the policy debate.
Do you think we'll know, would you say we'll know if they're on track in September? Very likely you're looking at something that's getting made, but
I think it's probably better in this Congress to say if they're off track by September, it's going to be tough. But I think at the end of the day, this is something that almost every Republican in Congress wants done, at least at the TCJA as a clean reauthorization with maybe a few tweaks. And they're just really, really hard. These members, as they move into an election cycle, are going to find it really, really hard to if the president gets behind one particular package, it's going to be hard to oppose.
John, and that's actually my next question. The other probably question our clients have. We've done a significant amount of planning around the loss of the SALT deduction for our clients in different high tax jurisdictions, state income tax jurisdictions. How do you think that comes out? Do you think it's a same is increased a bit, or is it going to go back to the way it was? No cap, but subject to the AMT.
If I had to guess, and I say this as a DC resident, so it gives me no joy. If I had to guess, it's likely that it will stay where it is. I know, again, that a number of high tax jurisdiction Republicans have made it a major priority So I think we probably get closer on that, or maybe a slight increase. But it's ultimately, I think it just costs too much. It doesn't matter to enough of the party of the party membership in Congress to be a do or die issue to hold up the passage. I'm happy to be proven wrong on that. Believe me. I just think at the end of the day, if you're getting either permanent cuts or 10 years, some really significant length in there, that most members will say, we'll take half a loaf on this.
Do you think, and you think that I think you're right. I mean, there's a number of Republicans in high tax states, but you think they'll eventually, who have made some promises that they wouldn't vote for certain things without a SALT limitation repeal, but you think they'll ultimately go along?
I think they'll ultimately go along. They may get some slight increase above that 10,000, greater than the 10,000, I believe it is now. But a full repeal is unlikely, and there's sort of policy reasons within the party. Obviously, at the state level, Republicans push a low tax model, a no income tax model in many instances, and so there's a real ideological concern that the SALT deduction is incentivizing bad policies, bad tax policies at the state and local level, and then the absence of Republican senators from those high tax jurisdictions. If Larry Hogan had won, it may be a different option. It may be a different scenario. But just relying primarily on a handful of House members is just going to be tough.
John, before we go, so we talked about the just huge tax policy issues, but I would imagine that for some of our clients who have very specific situations, this is a good time to talk to advisors about advocating for those smaller positions, because just as you said, likely that they're going to pass a very sprawling bill. My sense is, and I'm just thinking here, there's going to be some revenue raisers that are going to be small, but they're going to need to find those. So there might be somebody, who has enjoyed a break, who may not be in a position to do that anymore. Or conversely, there's situations that are just inequitable or not fair or causing a drag. I mean, I would imagine this is a pretty big time for advocating for, especially smaller provisions that are not intuitive. They're not the SALT limitation. What's your? I would imagine you're very busy at this time.
Yeah, I think if you find yourself in a position where one of the smaller dollar figure tax credits is incredibly important to either your business or to your family's investments, it oftentimes, you can never on an individual basis match the throw weight of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce or some of these large financial services associations. But there is a real risk that because it's a must-pass piece of legislation, that these large coalitions and trade associations are going to be willing to, aren't going to let perfect be the enemy of the good. So there will be people who, based on their investment strategy or based on, their sort of position, may very well get left behind, to your point. If it's one of the smaller tax credits, it could go by the wayside to pay for part of a larger subset. So there's always that risk. And that's why I encourage is if people have specific questions to please follow up with you and I, and we can get you a sense of the likelihood of positive action.
Exactly. So today you're probably, John, just unbelievably busy with the amount of the new administration and that sort of thing. It must be. Is it fun? Stressful? What's the vibe among?
It's well, and some of this is as one of our Republican lobbyists, I'm probably having more fun than some of my Democrat colleagues right now. But it's an exciting time, I think, with the unpredictability of tariffs. I do think they have a number of senior people at Commerce, at Office of Management and Budget at the White House, at National Economic Council that are committed to pushing to reshore manufacturing, to bring back sort of that broad-based prosperity. They're not always going to get it right. I think there's a lot of impatience with the president himself, obviously, given the pace of announcements. But I think as they settle in, you'll see a very dynamic White House, and they've got this two-year window where Congress is, undoubtedly with them. And so, yeah, it's an exciting time to be in D.C.
Absolutely. So we should summarize March 6th, 2025. It's about 4 o'clock now. You think TCJA estate tax exemption will be extended, perhaps, hopefully permanently, and you think good chance they'll get it done by the end of the year, and we'll know sometime around September, October, but you're less optimistic on the SALT limitation repeal or change. Is that we'll hold you to it for the next 2 minutes, John?
Yeah,
so.
I think that's exactly right. I think there's a little bit of legislative momentum here with the budget resolution coming successfully out of the House, with at least coalescence for now upon a single bill, like a one bill approach, as opposed to breaking it up into multiple bites, which all to me increases the possibility of a permanent or very long term extension. As a consequence of that, it makes it less likely for some of these changes to be incorporated into the package, because it just costs so much more if it's permanent.
John, I'm so glad you came to visit us today.
Thanks for having me.